So we're back again, and just want to recap some of the weaponry that was used during World War I and the advancements in weaponry and new forms of fighting. So let's just look at this and kind of get a glimpse into some of the new fighting, weaponry that was used. All right. So one was the flamethrower. All right, and this sort of spread fire. All right, by launching burning fuel. All right, now it wasn't used as much at the beginning of the war, um, but then it was seen, oh wow, this is a pretty uh, destructive weapon. So many started to use it. Um, of course, it was better used, I guess, at short range, and it sort of threw people for a loop at first until sort of like the British and French overcame their initial alarm. And we'll see that with a lot of the different weapons that were used. Um, uh, Germans launched in excess of 650 flamethrower attacks. Okay, we really don't see any numbers for the French or the British. And by the close of the war, the flamethrower use had been extended to use on tanks. All right, and this is sort of going to be used throughout World War II also. All right. Grenades. As with most things at the start of the war in August 1914, the Germans were ahead of the pack in terms of grenade development. All right. And even as the war began, the Germans had 70,000 hand grenades in readiness, along with a further of 106,000 rifle grenades. Now, the one thing about grenades is that it wasn't necessarily a new weapon, but of course, it was used more widely. All right, as you can see with the numbers here. There's a picture of an egg grenade. All right. Machine guns, of course, this was the first time that this weapon was used in war. All right, they one of the limitations, so to speak, of the machine gun was that they would overheat. All right, and there would sort of have to be some kind of cooling mechanism, or they would become inoperative. All right, water, of course, was the cooling mechanism that was used. All right. Now, the increasing success of machine guns, they sort of started to mount them on aircraft, all right, and later vehicles and tanks, all right. Now, and warships, as you see here, all right. Poison gas. One of the ways that I guess to that was developed to break through the trench lines was the use of gas. All right, and of course, this was considered like to be one of those uncivilized, inhumane forms of weapon. All right, prior to World War I. All right, of course, they had to find, like I said, new ways of overcoming the stalemate of trench warfare. Now, the Germans used a chlorine gas, and of course, the neutral powers like USA at the time, at first, this was very, they condemned this, all right? Um, and I guess more or less, when you have these new forms of weaponry, you kind of have to figure out a way to shield yourself from attack from these weapons and to kind of create safety mechanism. So the Allies recovered from this whole initial shock of this chlorine gas, um, and they were able to respond better. All right, and one of the ways that we'll see will sort of be like the gas mask, things to sort of block the gas out. All right. So at first, though, this poison gas and chlorine gas, it took a lot of casualties. All right. Um, but once, like I said, mechanisms were in place to sort of shield from the gas attack, casualties diminished. All right. And so many thought at first, though, that gas was going to be uh, a weapon that would turn the tide of the war. However, it was not. All right. So this is a picture of British soldiers who were blinded by poison gas. All right, and they're sort of holding on to each other because they can't really see. All right. Rifles. All right. Machine guns, of course, the mortar and grenade technology. Um, the rifle probably was the most crucial, as you can see here, ever-present infantry weapon throughout World War I. All right. They were easy, portable, and they were useful in this whole trench warfare. Okay. Tanks. All right. The first combat tank was ready in 1916. All right. Um, Britain, of course, had produced by 1960 over 2,600 tanks, and the French produced more than 3,800. All right. The Germans sort of, I guess, were never convinced of the merits. All right. They only produced 20. Now, one of the things I guess that you will see with the tanks, they broke down a lot. All right, and they moved battles out of trenches and back to the battlefield. So this is one of those key um, weapons that sort of made the war more mobile and broke the stalemate. All right, the mortar was another old weapon. All right, that sort of was revived during World War One. It was a tube that was designed to fire like a projectile at a steep angle, and one of the key things is that it fell straight down. All right, on the enemy. So you would sort of project it at a 45-degree angle, and it will fall straight down on the enemy. Now, it could be fired from a short distance, which is one of the advantages, and kept to protect the sort of the trenches. All right, and it was lighter and more mobile, and it will fall smack dab into like the enemy trench. All right. It was very predictable. All right, and then we're going to also look, at aircraft. Aircraft, very important. Take note of this. All right, when the war broke out, the number of aircrafts on all sides and all fronts were very small. All right, so France had less than 140. However, by the end, it was over more than 4,500 aircraft. All right, so a lot of the aircraft that sort of were launched, especially with France, large number of them, were lost in battle. All right. Of course, this deals with training of pilots and using planes for war. We have a lot of reconnaissance missions. All right, where people were basically like looking um, for things, looking for enemy lines and enemy troops. All right, any kind of advancement. That's sort of what these missions were for. Um, However, when you start mounting like machine guns on the airplanes, all right, planes are going to be used for fighting purposes. All right, and of course you have bombers, um, and the ground attacks. They were aimed at disrupting enemy forces at or near the front and during the course of the battle itself. All right. So there you see we have some of the weaponry for World War One and new advancements in weaponry. So take note of that, and we're going to keep on moving. All right.